All right, the agenda for today, we're going to start with questions from homework. So I think at this point we've assigned to 56. After last class, you should have been able to do up to 56. We'll start with that. Has anybody got any homework stuffs we want to talk about? Or general stuff, that too. Avery.
Can you do 56?
Sure, we can do 56. So the directions here say to use function composition to verify that each functions are inverses. So for 56, we need to do g or f of g of x, and then we also need to do g of f of x. So we'll start with f of g of x. So I'll just start by replacing my g with the equation that it's equal to. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Ellie, it's for you. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be plugging that function into the x in f. So I have 3, and then e natural log x plus 5 over 3 minus 1, and then the plus 1, and then the minus 5. So there's my function composition. Looks pretty gross, but it's okay. Hi. Thank you. And that's okay, not a big deal. We'll start simplifying. So I'm going to start simplifying inside the exponent. So I see that plus 1 and minus 1 can cancel each other out. And then I remember that logarithms and exponentials can cancel each other out if the bases of the two things match. So here I have an exponent base of e, and here I have the natural log, which I remember is log base e. So because those two things, the bases match, they can cancel out. So the thing that was in the exponent moves out of the exponent after the canceling. It just comes into the main line. And there I see I have a times 3 and a divides by 3. So those can cancel out. And I have the plus 5 and minus 5. Those will cancel out. And I'm left with just the x. Yay! That's what I was hoping for. But we're not done, right? We have to do the other composition. Oh, man. So let's go back there. So again, I'm going to replace the f with the function that it's equal to. And then this time I'm going to be plugging this into the x in g. So we have the natural log of 3e to the x plus 1 minus 5 plus 5 all over 3 minus 1. Again, if I look inside the parentheses there, I notice I have the plus 5 and minus 5 can cancel each other right out. That's good news. And then I have the minus 3 and the plus 3 cancel each other out. And just as we mentioned before, exponentials and logarithms can cancel each other out when their bases match. Natural log is log base e, and I have an exponent base e. So when I do that, the thing that was in the exponent moves outside the exponent and just down into like the main line. So the +1 and -1 can now cancel, and I'm left with just x. Yes. Avery. Okay. Who's next? Okay, that's fine. You can always change your mind and talk to me one-on-one a little bit later. Oh. Yes, 52. Reese. Okay. So for 52, part A asks if it's a function or not. So I'm just going to go to my calculator and just graph this. Notice that on the left-hand side here, I have just the regular old log button. So I'm going to press that. Now that looks just like what I have in my problem. And I use my calculator all the time, and I know I've just changed my window recently, so I'm going to do a zoom standard instead of just hitting graph. So there's my function. Certainly appears to pass a vertical line test, so I'm convinced of that. Let me do this so I can look at that calculator at the same time. Part B says to state the domain and range. Well, I remember from my Algebra 2 class that whatever we're taking the logarithm of has to be positive. So if I add 1 to both sides, I know that x is greater than 1. So my domain is just going to be 1 with a parenthesis to positive infinity. Is that okay? And hopefully from my Algebra 2 class, I remember that the range for any logarithm is always going to be all real numbers. Bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you didn't, it's hard to see on the picture that we have here, but this is actually the location of a vertical asymptote here. So it's actually like doing one of those right there at +1. But the calculator only has so much resolution, and it's pretty steep there, so it doesn't really know what to do. It says predict if the inverse relation is a function or not. Oh, sorry, determine if the relation is 1 to 1. Well, if I look at that, it certainly passes a horizontal line test, right? So I know we're 1 to 1. And then part D says, is the inverse a function? Well, yes, and I would say since f is 1 to 1, f inverse is a function. And then part E, this is probably the part that we wanted to talk about, where it asks us to write this as, or write the inverse for this, right? So my first goal, again, is to get the x by itself here, right? So I'm going to start by isolating the logarithm part. So I'm just going to subtract 8 from both sides. And now I have to ask myself, okay, I know an exponential cancels out a logarithm. Which exponential would I want to use here to make this as easy as possible? And I remember that, okay, the exponential should match the base of the logarithm. And when we just write regular log, that's an abbreviation for log base 10. So there's really like a 10 here that we just don't write. So I'm going to do the exponent base 10 to both sides. And I'm going to write those 10s like absurdly large so I don't confuse myself that I'm not multiplying both sides by 10. I'm saying 10 to the left-hand side and then 10 to the right-hand side. But the point is that those now cancel each other out. And now I can just add 1 over to get the x by itself. I'm going to make sure that I write that clearly so it doesn't look like the plus 1 is in the exponent, but rather in the main line. And now I just swap my x's and y's, and we are donezos. Does that feel okay? Great. Okay. So the test is coming up next class, right? So let's talk a little bit about what to expect for that. So if you look at, I made a test info tab in the content library. I just put it in there, so it may take a minute for your stuff to sync up. But it'll be in there. Here, we'll just push a sync right now. So your Chapter 1 test is going to cover sections 1.1 through 1.7. Section 1.8 is not going to be covered because we're going to do that a little bit later, where it falls more naturally into what we're going to be doing with trigonometry. The skills you should be able to demonstrate are, you should be able to determine if a relation is a function or not. I'll have 4 questions asking you to do that. So you should be able to do it whether it's a mapping diagram or a set of ordered pairs or a graph or an equation. Regardless of what I give you, you should be able to tell if that's a function or not. You should be able to find the domain of a function algebraically and write your answer in interval notation. I'll have 2 questions like that. The trick for that is you have to remember that the stuff under the square root needs to be set greater than or equal to 0. And the stuff in a denominator needs to be set not equal to 0, right? That was the kind of the trick there, and then we work that out into an interval. You should be able to write the intervals of increasing and decreasing if I give you the graph. You should be able to use your calculator to locate the extreme. Oh, forgot a T there. And then classify the type, whether it's local or global, max or min. You should be able to prove if a function is odd, even, or neither. There's one question of that. There's one extrema question, by the way. Right, I have that written there. You should be able to find all the vertical and horizontal asymptotes for a function and then justify your answer with a table. So there's one question like that. You should be able to perform function operations. So add, subtract, multiply, divide, or compose 2 functions. 2 questions like that. You should be able to find the inverse of a function. 1 question of that, and that should be regardless of whether I give you a mapping diagram or a set of ordered pairs or a graph or an equation. And then if I give you 2 functions, you should be able to show that they're inverses using composition. I'll write that. And there'll be 1 question like that. I think that's 14 questions if I count it up. Does anybody have a question or clarification about kind of the stuff that we've listed here? I think 14, if I add up all the places I said, like, I'll be one like this or two like that or whatever. I think there's 14 total. Sid? They're all written.
Can we get some multiple choice?
I mean, do you really want multiple choice?
Questions. It might minimize our chances.
I mean,
Maximize our chances.
okay, if I write multiple choice questions, every one is gonna have the option all of the above or none of the above.
Well, how would it be all of the above?
Well, which one of these are in the domain of X? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those numbers could be in a domain, or none of them might be in the domain, or maybe just two. Right? Like, if I have to write a multiple choice math test, that's what it's going to look like. And that maybe is worse than just doing it by hand, like doing all written. The one I've written today is for this one is all written. So I think the review that I presented to you guys in the content library is pretty on par with the level of questions that I would ask on your test. Now, what's going to be longer, the review or the test? The review, because there's more variations. I'm not going to do like every possible or like version of a question like there are in the review. But I think this is a pretty fair representation of the kinds of questions. Certainly the test questions would be no more difficult than anything you see on here. Will things on the review be harder than test questions? Possibly, for sure. But this looks, as I go back and look at this was pretty representative of what you would have to do for the test. And in some cases, some of these questions much harder than things I would ask you to do on the test, but I won't tell you which ones. But also should be pretty representative of things we've done in the homework, right? There's nothing on here that's like, oh my goodness, this is out of left field. We didn't do anything like this. It's like, oh, it kind of all looks the same. And obviously, like, if you look at the review, the front that says from section 1.8, should you do that? No. Why not? Because we didn't do it. Everybody feel okay about that? Okay, so our time here today, you can spend working on your review, but you also, for every test in this course, get to use a half sheet of notes for the test. That half sheet needs to be handwritten. You can write on the front and back. You can put anything on it that you would like. You can write notes yourself on like how to do things. If you can handwrite the entire review on there, you can do that. I would probably just stick with the things that were the hardest for you, because I don't know that you're going to get 7 pages of review on there on a half sheet front and back, but you can try. Oh. So again, when I say a half sheet, I mean like half of a standard like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, not like half a poster board.
What if you do a half or a full sheet? And then you fold in.
Here's what I don't want, is I don't want to have to like flip all these over to make sure that there's only like one side written on. That's why I say a half sheet front and back, because I don't have to flip anything over to make sure that there's only stuff written on one side. So that's why I ask for it in that format. It's just to eliminate like 2 minutes of my time of having to go like flip through them all. I just collect them all. I don't care where you've written on it, because it's a half sheet. You can write on front and back. You can write on all over it. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
What's up? I mean, I'd prefer that you have a half a sheet with it on the front back, so I don't have to go and flip it over to look to make sure there's only something on one side.
Yeah, can I just?
But you could just untape it on the test and have stuff on the other side.
Oh,
Like I'd have, like I,
Yeah.
well, I realize that I understand what you're trying to get at. Just do it the way that I asked. Is that okay? It's only one side to recopy, right? Because take the thing you have, cut it in half, and then just copy the one half onto the other half, right? No, because if it's okay to write on both sides, I don't care that something's written on both sides of the half sheet. If you give me a full sheet and you write on the other side, now you're using more than a half sheet's worth of paper. Right, but I still have to check it. And potentially, if everybody does this, it means I have to check like 100 sheets of paper, which is a hassle. No, I don't have blue. I don't know. Okay. Everybody feel okay with like what the test format's going to look like? And we've seen the review, right? And we've talked about the half sheet. Oh, one more thing on the half sheet. The half sheet is due to me before the test day.
so tomorrow?
Ideally, just let me elaborate before you're like, oh my God, what does that mean? Oh, just let me finish, okay? Let me finish.
No. Shush. Let the man finish.
So, again, the half sheet is due before the test. I will give it back to you on the test day. My recommendation is if you're turning me into a physical copy, take a picture. So if you're studying, you still have your half sheet to use while you're studying, right? 2, ideally you'd turn it in by the end of class today. If that's unrealistic for you, I understand. Send me a digital copy, and that's okay. I will print your digital copy for you and hand it to you on your test at the test. Or even worst case scenario, because you guys are the first ones taking the test, if you bring it to me in the morning on the test day, but before class has started, that's okay. Okay? You could stop by during community time even on the test day before we've taken the test, before the test has been handed out. That would be okay. Does everybody understand what I'm asking for?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions about what we should be doing with our time here? Everybody got something to do? Yeah. Good luck. All right. And again, as you're working on things, if you come up with something or a question or you're not sure, you want to work through something with me or ask me something about the review or whatever, please don't hesitate, right? Totally fine.